Hi everyone, this is your host Prasha and welcome to her STEM Stories episode number 68. I want to give a quick shout out to the Women of Science Tarot card game, which is a new card game for telling stories. Stories about our lives, about our universe, and about our future. Play it to tell stories with your friends, learn about amazing women in STEM throughout history, and celebrate centuries of scientific discovery. Created by Massive Science and supported by over 300 backers on Kickstarter, the limited edition deck is now available at shop.massivesci.com. That's shop.massivesci.com and get your own Women of Science Tarot card game today. Massive Science does some incredible work in supporting the science writing community, so make sure you check their work out by using the links in the episode notes. Today we're talking to Katia, who is pursuing her PhD in bioengineering in Lisbon, Portugal. And she joined us all the way from Portugal, which is incredible. And she has a very international STEM story. So make sure you keep listening.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Did you ever know that you could study STEM and travel the world all at the same time? One of the reasons I started the show was when I saw some of my friends traveling the world for their STEM professions, whether it was education or jobs. Our guest today is doing exactly that. Katia Banderas is working towards her PhD in bioengineering in Portugal. During her education, she has traveled the world. She started out at the Czech Republic and made her way to the US as a transfer student at MIT. She has combined her two passions, science and travel, and she writes about them in her blog. She's using her engineering skills to bring stem cell technology to the market faster. She also passionately advocates for diversity in STEM. Let's talk to Katia to learn more about her international STEM story. Katia, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Prasha. Thank you so much for having me in the show. It's a pleasure.
Oh, this is so great. You're coming to us all the way from Lisbon, Portugal, and this is so cool.
Yeah, like I was really excited to be a part of this, and also to be able to bring in a bit about the experience of sharing a bit about my country and the reality here, and how is the reality in the US, because I also lived in the US. And I think it is a great platform for us that are women in STEM in so many different countries to share our experiences and maybe inspire someone in a positive way. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, that's amazing. So you have a biomedical engineering degree, right? And you studied all around the world, including the US and Czech Republic.
Yeah.
And, before we get into your technical education and all that stuff, I need to know more about how is it like living in Lisbon, Portugal? It's on my list of places to go. And I always wonder how awesome it must be. It looks really pretty in the pictures.
Yeah, it is. I actually never really lived in Lisbon. I am from a town that is 10 to 15 miles away from Lisbon. And I always lived in the suburbs all my life, but I studied in Lisbon for my undergrad, bachelor's and master's. It's a bit different, the system, than in the US. And I think it's a city with a good quality of life because it's sunny most of the time. It's still relatively cheap in comparison to the US, even though the cost of housing for Portuguese people is so high. So basically it's been really hard to live in Lisbon for young adults right now. But I think that you have lots of good restaurants. I love Portuguese food, of course, and I always tell everyone about food, and it's really close to the beach. You can take a train and in 20 minutes or less, you're on a beach nearby. So that's something that foreigners also like a lot. And if you like walking, the best thing for me to do in Lisbon is you don't really have big museums. Like we have a few nice museums, but the biggest thing is like just walking around, seeing the viewpoints and like the 7 hills of Lisbon and just soaking in the view. And since the river is so large, like you get a lot of very blue sky. And yeah, it's really, and the houses are pretty colorful, lots of tiles. So you got a lot of different artistic senses in the different neighborhoods. So yeah. I think it's a quite diverse location for people that really like walking around and soaking in the soul of the places. So yeah.
That's awesome, because fun fact, my husband is half Portuguese and half Italian, but his father is Portuguese, but that's, so many generations ago they moved to the US, so that they're not that close to the culture now, but they definitely cook a lot of Portuguese food. There's a lot of Portuguese people in where I work. Like I think 80% of our workforce is Portuguese, first generation actually. So like people who had moved to the US, in the 60s or the 70s and coming up to their retirement. So Portuguese is a big part of the New England, at least this area, which is, Providence, Rhode Island, Falls, Massachusetts, a lot of Portuguese people.
Yeah, and in Boston as well. Like, as you said, I had also lived in the US. I studied in Boston for 2 years, 2017 and 2018, during my PhD in bioengineering. We'll get into that a bit later. But Boston and all the Boston area is a big Portuguese community, especially coming from the Azores Islands. And fun fact, like I actually was not planning for this when I came to the US. But for instance, like my grandmother is from one of the islands in the Azores. So I ended up knowing I had cousins from my mom that were living in upstate New York and in Canada and in San Diego, and I connected with all of them. So it was great to like meet in person this part of my family that had immigrated to the US and Canada for so long. And really added some like a bit different flavor for my experience. For instance, this part of family came to visit in Lisbon like 2 weeks ago, and they also had a blast. And in Boston, Providence, all these places, you got a lot of Portuguese food, and like it was kind of like that I was going to a different culture, which I really like to explore different cultures, but that I also could have a bit of a taste from home sometimes. So and also like when I was living, I always lived with people that were not Portuguese while I was in the US. So I tried to cook Portuguese food for them, and they were all very impressed. So I really like this thing that you can bring a bit of cultures through food or the music or even like the science is also part of the culture of each place. So like through all these conversations, that I think that's what makes the United States also a huge melting pot of all cultures in the world, and such amazing conversations that I had there. Like it was really enriching from the personal point of view.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings us to your story, because you are trying to combine traveling and science and doing something different than a lot of us are doing. So tell us a little bit about, you say that you moved, you made it a point to move during your studies. So walk us through a little bit through your educational journey.
Yeah, like even before that, like I'm going to go back to when I was like, I don't know, 4 or something.
Yes, so, perfect.
Like, I grew up in a house that had a lot of books. Like my father used to work in a printing facility, and he would bring us a ton of books. And like even when I was a kid, my favorite book was this huge geographical encyclopedia. So like I was born in 89, so like I'm 30, so this encyclopedia is now a bit old. Fascinated with all these different places and photos in the encyclopedia. Like I think it was the first time I ever saw the Yellowstone, like the springs in Yellowstone. I was like, oh, I want to go there so bad. And fun fact, I traveled a lot in the US, but I didn't go to Yellowstone yet. But anyway, that's for another thing. So like I think that since then, like, and also a big event that there was in Portugal when I was 9 years old, that was called like Expo 98, which is like this exhibition of all the countries in the world. There was like this passport. And I wanted to go inside every pavilion, even of these very tiny Africa, like, I don't know, Pacific Islanders, African countries. Like, I just want to get stamps and see all the countries. So I think I always had this urge to travel, even when I only started traveling more, when I actually could move out of the country to for a part of my studies. I did biomedical engineering, as I mentioned in the beginning, in a university in Lisbon that is like one of the most well-known engineering schools in my country. And even before I went to this degree, when I was choosing a degree, I was already looking into what were the possibilities for Erasmus. Erasmus is this program that is more associated with the European Union, where you can apply to study in another European country for 1 or 2 semesters. So back then, I always loved Irish culture, and I never got to go to Ireland yet. But I was like, yeah, there's this protocol with Ireland, I'll go. But then this protocol closed, and I ended up going to the Czech Republic, to Prague. And I went there in the 4th year of my master's. No, 4th year of my degree that is like integrated master's. It was a 5-year degree in engineering. And I was like, I think I was 21 when I moved to Prague for 5 months, and it was so enriching because I got to travel to several European countries that I had not been to yet. And and my class was like people from really all over the world, and it was so enriching to get to know all these people that I was like, yeah, I want to do this again and keep on exploring. And then after I graduated from my master's in 2011, I worked for 3 years in Portugal because I was having this question, like, should I do a PhD or not? Like, I knew I liked research, but I didn't only want to work in research or academia forever. I wanted to have other possibilities and have something that would allow me to learn a bit more about the business side of STEM that I felt that my degree back then was lacking a bit. And I ended up applying to this program that is called the MIT Portugal program. That it was a collaboration between some Portuguese universities and MIT. So I selected to the bioengineering track, and I was like, yeah, and I got selected. There are like, I think 3 different types of scholarships that the Portuguese Science and Technology Foundation can award you, and I got a scholarship that is like mixed fellowship that you can spend up to 2 years abroad during your PhD. And when I was choosing my thesis, I ended up talking with the person that would become my supervisor, and they said, yeah, I went to MIT for a while, I think you should also go and enjoy the experience, so I'm going to sign you up for 1 year. To go, which is the maximum foreign students with a specific type of visa, the J1 can stay. So I stayed in MIT 1 year, and I really liked Boston. And since my PhD, even though it's related with stem cells, it's a computational PhD, I feel that I could sometimes, like, I don't know, spend some time away from MIT, but still sometimes traveling. But I was also having meetings while I was traveling, so it kind of allowed some flexibility for that. But then I think it was really great to be able to invest in not only getting to know these amazing universities and research in the US. Actually, one thing that I really advocate for and that I liked in the US is visiting university campuses and going on those free walking tours and get to have like college admission tours. It's really funny to know the stories about the different universities. And then I ended up staying 1 more year. And then I was affiliated with Harvard Medical School for the 2nd year, and still I got to keep on experiencing the American culture in a different way, because since I went with several people from the same Portuguese program as I did, I felt in the 1st year I was, of course, meeting people from lots of different places, but I was very intertwined still with the Portuguese community. And the 2nd year, it was a bit different. So I think I experienced a bit more of a culture shock, but I think I also grew more as a person.
Yeah, and I think that happens all the time with international students. Like that happened with me when I moved here, and I ended up living in an apartment complex that was all Indian people. Then Facebook groups that I got housing through were all Indian people. And then, my entire master's, I think I interacted with one American. Only after coming to work was when I finally started understanding the culture, making friends, working on my accent, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, like for instance, like I don't feel my accent changed a lot when I was in the US, but I still get, I don't know if you were aware of this, but it seems that within the Latin languages, that Portuguese from Portugal looks a lot like Russian when it's spoken.
Yeah.
So actually, like the last travel I did, like I went to Colombia for a meeting for an organization I volunteer for, and then I was in Madrid right after. And I met some people from the Oslo, and I was like, "Oh, are you Russian? Like, or do you have any Russian background?" And I'm like, "No, not at all." But like, you're not the first person ever who tells me that. Like, lots of people would tell me that.
Yeah.
And even in the US, like lots of people ask me because like they thought my accent is not really common.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of cool, and still people were very polite and very encouraging and saying, "Oh, you guys have excellent English, and it's so great that you come here to Boston." Because I had this feeling that Boston gets a lot of American tourism and not really as much foreign tourism. Even in Portugal, like people that would come and visit me in the US and like, "Yeah, but let's go to New York City," and everyone knows about New York or California, but not as much about the other
Boston.
places.
Yeah, I know. Because my family still gets confused. They don't know Boston is like, they can never remember that Boston is a city. They just don't understand. Like, we thought Boston was a state, and I'm like, no, it's a city. And so a lot of people don't know about Boston. But on this topic, tell us a little bit about what it was like to be a woman in STEM. So I mean, again, already a minority, but also then on top of that, struggling with not struggling, but not having English as your first language, and then trying to maneuver this field, which is heavily male dominated. Like, what was it like? What were your challenges there?
Like for me, I feel that not having English as my first language was that big of a challenge, because the community in MIT itself is so international. Like even like I helped with some classes, like, and there were so many foreign students, so that wasn't a big problem. But sometimes I would get a bit self-conscious, because before I moved to the US, I used to think that my English was very good, but then I was forced to think in words that I never use in English ever. So I was like doing all these big turnarounds to say something. I would even tell my American colleagues, "Oh, it means like, I don't know, some word in Portuguese and I can't say," and then they would help me. And it's like, I had to learn how to get vulnerable, to really ask for helping to improve my English. I even thought about doing accent classes, but then I thought, like, I don't need that. Like, this is a melting pot of different people. Everyone is trying to talk their best, and I still need to kind of keep also my Portuguese. Sometimes now the reverse thing happened. Like, I had a week that several people asked me in Portugal, several people asked me if I was Portuguese, because they said my accent didn't look Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for real? Like,
you
come
can't
on. I know that, like, my accent, I think when you speak a lot foreign languages, kind of your native accent changes.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised. And then sometimes I'm speaking and I'm forgetting words in Portuguese. And as I told you, I was in Colombia, like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, and I also speak a reasonably good Spanish. So during the same day, I was speaking Spanish, English, and Portuguese, and my mind was like completely blown away. But from that, getting back into the challenges as a foreign woman in STEM, I think sometimes I felt that it can be a bit harder to earn respect, because still, if in the US, I feel in the US there's a lot of resources and a lot of structures in place, at least in the places where I worked at, to really keep people with an open mind for minorities, and really zero tolerance against sexual abuse and harassment, and also discriminatory speech, which I feel that in Portugal is still lacking. but still that doesn't mean that people always behave well, of course. And I think that there was a mix between both ends of the spectrum, like people that are extremely respectful and people that sometimes can look at you kind of funny. But then I had to try to overcome this kind of imposter syndrome of thinking I'm not good enough because I don't come from this background. But then like I was like, I know my value. I know that I also went through this very hard engineering school and that I'm trying my best. I'm curious. And I think that's what in the end people really matter. That's also a lot of what is valued in the US is that you work hard and you are curious about things. But still, it feels sometimes a bit hard to be able to communicate and really, even when you know that you want to earn the respect, but most people were very kind and very respectful. I even felt that they were so open. It was very easy to collaborate with a lot of people. But one thing that really made me sad is that you can still see a lot of differences in representation. Like most of the people I collaborated with were male, like we collaborated well. But I think that there's going to still take some time to be able to have a more equal kind of representation in these fields, because most of the top careers in Portugal, it's the same problem. When you start going higher in the career ladder in academia, like you start more and more unequal. And that's one thing that I think it's the same everywhere. And I wish there was an easy answer for that, and there isn't. There are so many factors in play. But I felt that most of the times it was a lot of things were in my head, and I had reasons to start entrusting myself more and really become more assertive in the way I was doing work, and not like having this, like, I don't know, sometimes lack of confidence because you're meeting people that are so accomplished. And in the end, most of those people were very, very kind to me, fortunately. Of course, I also had some not as positive experiences, but I also learned from that. And one thing that I felt was really encouraging, like I once met a lady and she started talking about my background. Like I got a lot into learning about health economics and bioprocess economics for my PhD. And she was like, oh, your background is so great. You should think about becoming a venture capitalist, and I would really love to see more women in these areas. And having a fellow woman in that field say that to me, I feel it was really encouraging, because the business world is also something that we see a lot. There's a lot of stereotypes and conceptions about. And I was like, yeah, like there's different people from like to break even the stereotypes that even if I fight to not have, that I still have. And it was like one of the most encouraging things people told me, and it was really, really nice to hear. But I don't know what has been your experience in
I think it makes so much sense, because I think my experience has been also very positive for the most part, and in terms of like working or even at school, but they've always been very receiving of talent in the most cases. Of course, there are a few outliers, and there are things that people say and don't realize why they said that. But I think there's also, this need for making people think being more open-minded and getting more and more educated in these different cultures. So tell us a little bit about what is your PhD about in bioengineering?
Okay, so my PhD was the development of an open source computational tool that is meant to help in assessing technologies that are meant to be stem cell-based therapies, and to learn a bit more on what you should invest or how should you improve manufacturing to try to improve the cell yield and decrease costs, increase quality, because there's a lot of variability issues when producing stem cell therapies, but also the issues of cost. And also there are other issues like clinical trials are conducted and the different indications and dosing schemes. And I wanted to connect that kind of bioprocess modeling of trying to be more inspired in how the cells behave in vitro to then also take that to combine with some kind of a cost effectiveness analysis. I also wanted to learn a bit more why some products that are so innovative go to the market and some don't. And in the US, the system is different. It's not based on cost effectiveness analysis per se, as it is like in the UK or Canada or also in Portugal, that is very based on the United Kingdom healthcare system. But it was very interesting because it started I did some work in collaboration with 2 hospitals in the United States that were either with an interest or involved with clinical trials with stem cells, and started modeling like different assumptions on how the therapy would be effective or not, and how the costs that the therapy would have over time would be compatible or not with the manufacturing costs. And that would teach some lessons on to which groups of patients this therapy should be tested on first, because those are the where it is more effective, but also where it can save more costs to a healthcare payer, and also on how like the manufacturing hurdles are not compatible with reimbursement prices. Yeah, to try to bring a bit more education on these goals, because I think at least my experience when I started doing biomedical engineering, like I always had an interest in tissue engineering and artificial organs, and really, I don't know, regenerate a person and really improve the life of this person. But then I started realizing a bit, okay, this technology is so cool, but how can we produce it in a scale? How can we make it cost effective? Because sometimes in science we are finding out very cool stuff, but maybe we are not thinking about sustainability of the production. Even environmental sustainability, that was not a thing I directly studied. But I also realized like the amount of waste and residues that producing these therapies also have can be insane at some point. So that's also something that we have to accommodate for when we develop technology. Of course, the costs, but the effectiveness, but also the sustainability of the businesses, the competition, because like other technologies that are more simple to produce can arise. And and also there was this thing that is a bit more theoretical, but based on more basic science. I wanted to combine a bit of everything, and of course it was a very extenuous task, but like I submitted my thesis in April, so I'm waiting for my defense. That my defense should be in September, I guess, so I'm really excited for what's going like to be the completion of this very exciting journey. And like I felt I really learned a lot of things that I knew a bit from my background in engineering, but also a lot of a different world on healthcare systems and business sustainability, and even other skills like science writing and communication that I got very interested on, obviously.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I feel like you're probably one of the first engineers who's been on the show and has talked about this whole, cost model and sustainability and a business standpoint, because the more I think about it, that's exactly what engineers do. That's their job in the industry, no matter what industry you work in. This is what's expected from you. More than innovation, what's expected of us is, because I work in manufacturing and I have a chemical and a mechanical engineering degree, and my day-to-day job, when I was a design engineer or now that I'm in quality, my job is, very much focused on making the processes efficient, and then, making sure that we don't spend too much money, keeping the business profitable, and then, still maintaining quality. So I think striking that balance is literally what engineers do day and night, no matter what technology you work with or what industry. And I love that you have done that in medical field for such an important research, which is stem cells. We hear about it. Very few people know exactly what it is. Sounds like, it'll cure cancer, and it's still very niche in itself. But if it is the cure for cancer, if it is going to cure these complicated diseases, then the work you're doing is phenomenal, because if it's not affordable, if the big investment companies don't want to invest in it, if people don't see it as a business, because you're right, science is great and we all need science, and there's this research that says that a lot of the stuff that is published is not reproducible. So people publish it and you can't reproduce it, which means it's pretty much useless, because if you can't reproduce, then how are you going to scale up? Forget about scaling, you can't reproduce it. And more and more these researchers are including like exact sources of where they're getting the materials from to help with reproducibility. But in the future, I think reproducibility will be a big factor in getting through some of these research reviews. But this is great. I'm so glad that someone is doing this, and I'm so glad that you took the time to share it with us. But also for the researchers who are listening, or for people who are developing new science, it's a good insight on what it takes to actually bring it to the market, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even my field was more like I was doing a lot of programming. So all my thesis was programming in Python. I now feel a bit tired of programming, but it was also really cool. It was combining this more very trying to be kind of a software developer, but combining it.
So cool.
Sometimes I used to feel a bit of imposter syndrome. One thing that I can also share is after I did biomedical engineering, and in biomedical engineering they teach you a lot how to program and how to process medical signals and medical images, or to build medical devices, but they really don't teach you as much how to work with cells or how to work in the lab. And I also really like the lab part, and I did lab for my master's, but then I ended up only doing programming work afterwards. And I did very interesting programming work about immunology for infectious diseases, and also for modeling how tissues respond to mechanical stimuli, which is all great. But then I was feeling when I started science, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this great research, I'm going to win the Nobel Prize, and I'm going to be like this genius. And then I started becoming a bit, maybe this is a bit cynical, because I started realizing my contributions are like a grain of sand, but maybe someone will read it and will pick upon it, and I'm going to contribute a bit and contribute in a group. I have supervisors that will suggest me to do this task, and I have to come up with original ideas on it. And sometimes I have colleagues in my lab that they work with stem cells, and they do amazing work with these cells, trying to make small organs that can be kind of disease models, or try to cure blood diseases, or there are so many awesome things going on. And I used to think, maybe because I'm programming, my research is not as exciting or as beautiful. And sometimes I used to feel that. But this week, I went to a conference about open source tools. And there was a keynote speaker in the conference that said, but 9 of the 10 most cited papers in science are methods. So maybe we should publish more methods and more techniques. And I started feeling, so maybe my choice, of course, I still would love to find out, I don't know, the cure for cancer or something that is really great. But methods, how to achieve those things are important. And of course, there were a lot of things I would like to have achieved with the methodology I learned in the time of my PhD, but 3 years and something is not enough to do everything. So I'm really working on the process to have this clear, and not only in my head that I looked so much through the code and know all the intricacies, but having someone actually look at it and be someone that doesn't have a lot of programming background, and be able to use it for their purposes and adapt it to the diseases they are working on, and even for other cell or tissue therapies. And I think that's really what I would like to contribute, and have really give the project the love it deserves. Because sometimes it's really easy, probably you also feel this, that the grass is greener on the other side when you hear about someone that has this amazing project. And sometimes you feel a bit, but maybe my project is not as great. And then it's the other way around. You explain your project to someone and people say, wow, that's amazing. And we have this exchange of trying to really sit down and think, okay, my work is not perfect, but it also has value. So that's the stage I'm at, to really conclude the PhD, and maybe even help in how to make these new cures be more sustainable. That's my main goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, this is so great. Your story is so well-rounded, and you're trying to do something that is very much needed, both in your research but also in your outreach that you do with your SciComm efforts. So tell us a little bit about your work at IEEE Potentials, and also how you're trying to grow your own SciComm brand.
Yeah, so for IEEE Potentials, it's a magazine from IEEE, which is a very large organization of engineers around the world. It was through my SciComm that I learned about this volunteer position, because Erin Winnick, that is the MIT Technology Reviews editor for space, she also does come on Instagram, and we had met in Boston. And I also had met some of the other SciCommers in Boston. And she posted on a group that she knew about this position, but that she would have to leave it. And if there were people that were willing to say something about themselves and maybe become editor. And it seems the journal liked my profile. So they also wanted a more international background. So me and I was one of the editors that was recruited voluntarily. And it was really on this thing that I really like writing. Even though I don't read so much right now, like I really like giving a voice to good stories. One of the things I was doing, and they picked up on it when I got my PhD interview, was that I was already doing some voluntary science column in Portugal. And back then, I only made two iterations of that. But back then, my idea is like, okay, I'm going to look to any new articles in Portugal in any area that is not medical, because I didn't want to be too biased. And I would reach out to those people and say, hey, I found out your article. I would like to make a voluntary column about it and interview you. And like, it was well received and people liked it. And then I ended up not having more time, because my research I was having a lot of work before my PhD, so I couldn't. But I always had this thing, and that I wanted to write and give a voice to new research. And that's why I felt it was very nice that I got into this magazine. We are more focused on students and young professionals in engineering. And the first assignment I was kind of put on, I suggested I was going to do a travel and technology column. And right now, the first issue I was a co-lead editor of was a sports technology issue. And I actually wrote about what I learned about sports technology when I went to all these different American sports. I went to baseball, to hockey, to football, figure skating. That was a very, very long dream. And I learned also, how can you learn about technology when you travel? Like, that's something that I wanted to inspire. And also being able to reach out to the people I know, or even people that I know in the IEEE community, and really give a voice to amazing things that are done. And that's kind of what I also try to do with my own SciComm. Maybe I try to really paint a bit of more like the PhD lifestyle. When I started my blog is called apulgarita.com. And it's based on a childhood nickname that is Katita, from Katia, and Pulgarita is like the little flea, because I was always like very jumping, very electric, and that I always wanted to go to all these different places. And I wanted to write about travel only at first, and how to travel on a budget, and travel on a PhD, time constraints, and how can you do it. And but then I started noticing that my PhD posts were more read, maybe because there's not as many people writing about PhD. And I started doing Instagram as well, and I wanted more to post some pictures about my experience in the US, and how is it like to be on as a foreign student, and how can you enjoy it while you have a lot of work and going through all these self-doubt, and also some existential crisis when your research sometimes, like when things don't work, and how can you keep going. I ended up meeting lots of different people that also do it, and it was also very enriching for my own personal development, because I got to know about so many different issues and so many different science facts that I had no idea about. So yeah, I think it even made me happier when I was writing. Like, I feel at this time, maybe because I was writing my thesis until like 1 month ago, and writing a PhD thesis is a very demanding project.
Yeah.
I kind of feel a bit tired, but I felt that I was always looking for these opportunities to write. Like, I even made some small writing pieces for like the MIT graduate students blog, or I interviewed a friend for MIT News, and it was also a very nice project, so that I could develop this passion that I always had, that was to bring new voices to be heard and to give good news to the world. Because when I was a kid, I used to think, okay, there's so many bad things going on in the world. Why don't we tell about this amazing science or technology that is doing something great for someone? Even today, like in the news in Portugal, it seems like that there is very few science content in national television, in the main, I don't know, daytime or also nighttime news. But there was this piece today about this a blind man that is wants to be a computer scientist, and how he builds hardware. And I'm like, okay, this is the kind of news that we really need, like how technology can serve the humanity and improve the life of, in this case, someone that has a disability. And that's the kind of thing that drives me, is how to give a voice to these things while I also can enjoy my own experience and have fun with that.
I think that is so great. The reason I'm not interrupting you is because you love talking about what you do, and it's just so nice to hear it. And it's just, you have so much to offer, and your energy is so nice that I didn't want to interrupt you, and I want to hear all of it. And I hope you continue to grow and continue to do all the great work you're doing. You seem to have immense energy, and I really don't think anyone can stop you, but just really keep doing what you're doing. And I have two questions before we wrap up. One is, in maybe a sentence or two, tell us what our audience can take away from your story.
Can take from your story is that it's okay to experiment with different things, like even with my blog and also with my own research. Like, I did a lot of things that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I was going through these roadblocks, and like, it's having these things and be able to, I don't know, write about it, talk about it, cry about it, and even talk with your supervisors and try to figure out a new way. And also, like, be okay with the fact that and the other thing is, be okay with the fact that you change as a person. Like, for instance, like what interests me in science careers, like when I went to university, is not the same thing as what interests me now. And I think I sometimes struggle a bit with accepting that, but I've been accepting that, like, we are always evolving, and that it's okay to like different things and to want to be different things. So that I think sometimes it's very easy to look to someone that has this very linear path and you don't. But it also brings some kind of a richness to your research and to your life, to change and experiment. And I think that's something that really, when you travel to live in a different country, that's something like life will smack you in the face when you live in a different country. Like, you're going to go through all these emotions that you had no idea they existed. And that happened a lot to me when I was in the US. And I felt that I sometimes would have thought that I would have liked an easier path, but I think it would not have been the same. I wouldn't have grown. So yeah, like, if you feel this itch for traveling or studying abroad, just do. Like, it's going to come with challenges, but you're really going to change, and just accept it. Like, you're going to become a better person no matter what. So.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. And then second, what's your favorite book?
Yeah, like, I don't read that much now, because like, I feel that after reading so many scientific articles, I think I'm going to talk about the things that when I read, they put me more emotions. Of course, maybe for the Geographic Encyclopedia must be my favorite book ever, because that was the first that captured my mind, this Portuguese encyclopedia. And also, more recently, I really like this thing about reading travel guides. I have a collection of Lonely Planet travel guides, and sometimes I just like scrolling through them.
That's awesome.
And yeah, but when I read, like, reading fiction, sometimes I read like reading these very cheesy romances. Like, it's something that I sometimes feel a bit shy about it. But like, for instance, recently, I really liked the Crazy Rich Asians book.
Yeah.
Even though like it's so, I don't know, tongue in cheek, but it really I like to read about books that are in different places. So I learned a bit about Singapore, even if what the book is fictional and maybe very exaggerated. I learned a lot about like this very tiny country in the world. So yeah. I like both things, like travel and also a bit of romance that is spent in beautiful locations.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I think we all love it. It's a guilty pleasure. You're just brave enough to accept it. Awesome. But thank you so much, Katia, for sharing with us all this great stuff. And, I am sure we could keep talking all day, and we'll still find out more and more about you. And we would love to, see where you go and collaborate more in the future.
Yeah, sure. I'd love that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that was Katia with her incredible STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Katia and her amazing work. If you are anxious about what's next in your career, then you need to sign up for our mailing list and our Conquer Your Career email series. This is a 5-part email series where you'll get emails on how to know what's the next step in your career. It comes loaded with some facts about me, but also some tools and resources that can help you figure out what's next in your STEM career. So please sign up at herstemstory.com and let us know what you think. Next week, we're talking to a teammate, Sophia Kulo, who's managing our Twitter account, is our next guest. So make sure you tune in next week because her story is fabulous. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.